And Oladipo wants it again. Approaching 2 minutes to play. With the left hand and authority.
He will give it to Donald Brown. Donald fights his way. Now ball's loose. Luck picks it up. And Luck scores! Andrew picked up the fumble and scored!
Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one! Another one!
Victor Oladipo has given the Pacers a 1-point lead.
The Colts are world champions! World champions for the first time since 1971!
Welcome to the Circle City Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sam Sinclair, and today I'm very lucky to be joined by Eric Seaman of RosterGuy. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Getting some stuff done around the house with my fiance today. It's been a good day.
That sounds like a pre-football Sunday. I've heard one myself.
Yeah, right up until it's the first Sunday of August, so we don't quite have football yet. Going forward, my Sundays will be dominated by football, though, probably.
Of course, like the rest of us. So, Eric, just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us what you do with RosterGuy, and just introduce yourself to the listeners that don't know you.
So I've been with RosterGuy since probably February, and pretty much, long story short, I actually graduated from Ball State with a major in journalism and telecommunications. Pretty much coming out of high school, my dream was to be a sports writer and cover the Colts. That was my dream job. Life took me to a small town in northern Indiana called Wabash. I worked at a newspaper there for about 4 years. I was a reporter there for about a year and a half, and then I was an editor for 2.5 years. But I still love writing. I don't work there anymore. I now work at a nonprofit organization doing fundraising. But I still love writing. I still love football. I still love the Colts. And so I don't exactly remember where I saw it, but I think it might have been someone else who was on RosterGuy at the time. I saw them share something about joining RosterGuy. If you're interested in, talking football, writing football, hit us up. I did. So I wrote for, probably 2 months. And then one day I approached Ross Wheatley, who's kind of the founder of RosterGuy, and kind of asked him, I see, I asked him what his thoughts were about us starting a podcast. And he says, he pretty much just told me, if that's something you want to do, more power to you. He says, but if you do it, pretty much you're going to be the one who's got to do it, because I don't really have time. And so pretty much 2 weeks after that, we put out our first episode. And I think we'll be dropping episode 10, I believe, here the next day or two. And I'm still do a little bit of writing from now and then, but I mainly focus on the podcast, try to get at least one out per week, and then I also am the copy editor for all the articles that go up on the website. So that kind of again allows me to get creative with talking sports with people on the podcast, but I also get to, I was a newspaper editor for 2.5 years, and so it kind of all those muscles and all those. All that is coming back to me now. We're looking at, your copy with us. Sam's a pretty good contributor with us, and then we have other guys too. Yep.
If you guys have ever read my stuff on RosterGuy, you got to thank Eric first, because he's edited a lot of my stuff. He'd be that teacher. I would probably leave a bunch of red marks on a lot of my articles. Ain't that right, Eric?
Yeah. Sometimes I want to leave you little notes, and sometimes I don't know. I like to give people little notes, like, hey, this is a really great article. Here's something else. Going forward, see if you can write it this way instead of this way.
And you've helped me a lot with just writing, and what words I have to say here, and how to pronounce, or how do you write out this word and stuff like that. So Eric's done a lot for me in my writing, and I appreciate that, man.
Oh, it's no problem, man. I'm happy to help you.
All right, so moving on to our show. Today we're going to talk about Andrew Luck's calf, because who hasn't already? Then we're going to talk about, and then we're going to go into the wide receiver group, and then we'll go into a little bit of the rookies and how they've been doing in camp, and then we'll talk a little bit about the first team defense and a lot of the mixing and matching that Matt Eberflus has done so far in camp. But to start the show, Eric, give me your thoughts on Andrew Luck's calf. Should he play in the preseason? How do you feel about him missing training camp so far?
it's not a big deal, at least at this point. I mean, yeah, it would be nice for him to be able to play in the preseason and kind of, get his body back with that muscle memory, especially his brain, having live game situations where you're not going up against your own team's defense. And the thing is that, he's still putting work in right now. He's running around a little bit, and he's still using this time right now to familiarize himself with the playbook. And, it's not like he's at home laying in bed with his leg elevated or anything like that. So my thoughts are, I mean, essentially, if he can play preseason, if the team thinks that's what's best for him, then obviously he does need to do that. Because there's a reason we have preseason. It kind of wakes your body up, gets your mind back into that mindset of, okay, I don't know what I'm going to be going up against next play, and just kind of dictating what kind of offense he wants to trot out there and adjust as the game goes along. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fine with it right now. I mean, it's barely August. So, like, right now, I think the team is just being precautious, and I think we all appreciate that, considering he missed an entire season a couple years ago.
Yeah, and it's not even just they're being precautious on Andrew. Like, they're being precautious on every one of the guys. We saw Paris Campbell have a hamstring injury on Sunday, and he hasn't practiced yet. So I think it's just, hey, let's pump the brakes. It's only July, August. Let's let Andrew fully heal up, and let's have him ready for September 8th against the Chargers.
Right.
So do you think he needs to play in the preseason? Do you think it's vital?
Well, it just depends. I mean, obviously, it would benefit him to play in the preseason, because that would indicate a couple things. First of all, that his body's in a good place, but also, again, it's just he needs to kind of get back into get his brain into game shape. So he does not need the preseason, because I think we all know that Andrew Luck's a special player. But it would definitely help us get into a good start, which has actually been something that's been a problem with this team for the past 7 or 8 years. Is we just can't get off to good starts. Last year's perfect example. We would start off 1-5, and then we ended up making it to the divisional round of the playoffs. But I wouldn't say he needs the preseason, but it would be incredibly beneficial for the success of the team this season if he was out there in some shape or form for a series or two at some point.
Yeah, we even heard Frank Reich said that he's not going to play in the first game against Buffalo, and of course we kind of expected he wasn't going to play against the Bengals week 4. So those 2 games, week 2 and week 3, those are the games we're looking to the most. And those are some really good teams. You got Cleveland coming to town and Chicago. Those are 2 teams that are probably going to make the playoffs. I would like to see Andrew play them 2 games. Even if he only plays 1 preseason game, I'm fine with that. Just to know that he's on the field and he's, if he really needed to play, he could play right now. But I wouldn't really have a problem with him missing all training camp and all preseason, just to know the fact that he's, 100% and he's ready to go for the Chargers week 1 of the regular season, because we're going to need him for sure with those 2 road games to start.
Yeah,
so Eric,
and Andrew, if you're listening to this, can you please play in the Chicago game, because I'll be at that one on August 24th. So Andrew, if you're listening, please play in that game.
Well, we really need him playing in the regular season, but if he plays the preseason, that's probably a lot better for all of us Colts fans.
Right.
All right, so do you think the calf strain's more serious than what the reports are? We did hear about when he was going through the labrum surgery. It wasn't really false reports, but I guess the team wasn't giving us all of the information that they were giving us. Do you think the calf strain is a little bit more serious than what they're giving us from the reports?
I don't believe so. I mean, from what I've read, it seems like he's been moving around a little bit while at training camp. Have you been seeing that at all, Sam, or has he not been at camp the past few days?
No, Sunday he was there, and that was the last day he was there. But what I've been hearing over the past couple of days is, over this past week that happened, was that he went through walkthroughs. It sounds like he's running around the field and everything like that. So it's not like, he's just throwing stationary passes. It sounds like he's moving around the pocket and everything like that and using his legs to throw. And I think that's good. I think that's good to hear, but I still want to see him participate in 11-11s before training camp finishes.
And I think, I don't know, maybe a lot of people don't quite understand that. Well, so like, for example, he had that labrum injury in his shoulder. But I think, and obviously that has a huge effect on the success of a quarterback and their accuracy and how much, how far they can throw it and how much zip they can put on the ball. But I mean, it's like any kind of sport. Your footwork and your leg work is half the battle. So this calf injury is significant in the aspect that your legs are very important to you as a quarterback. But with that injury though, from a few years ago, he didn't handle it correctly, and he ended up missing that entire 2017 season. Now though, he's come out and he said that he isn't going to cut corners, and he understands that injuries are a natural part of the game. I think previously he just kind of let it get to his head, but I think now he understands, he plays physically. He's that guy who every time he gets hit, he pats the defensive lineman on the butt, says "Good hit, bud." And so I don't know. I think he's going to go about this the right way this time.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it either. I think it's just happened. I think it just, once he got to practice, even though he did very limited action, he still just re-aggravated the calf, because you can go from 3 months of doing absolutely nothing to, going on football field and practicing. That could re-aggravate the calf, because, you go from doing 0 to it's probably 100. He probably went 100% of practices, even though he didn't do 11 on 11s. So he probably just re-aggravated the calf. The calf wasn't, it went from, of course, 0 to doing full physical activity. And I think that's just what happened. And, sitting out these last week and this coming week, that's probably going to be what's good for, it's probably going to be what's best for Andrew Luck as he slowly comes back from his calf strain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So we'll move on to the wide receiver group. I think this position and cornerback is probably the toughest to decide who's going to make the team. How do you feel about the wide receiver group, Eric?
So I don't know, like a month ago, I was super excited. I thought it was going to be lights out competition for this, but based off what I've seen and I've read, it's been relatively lackluster. Maybe I just hyped it up too much. I'm not sure. Obviously, Ty has been turning heads as he always does. Paris Campbell has made some plays, and there have been some nice grabs here and there, but I don't know. I'm just not hearing a lot of noise. Beyond the, probably, I don't know. It seems like for me, it's all that hype is really going to the linebackers. For me personally, as far as that's what I've been reading is that's been the playmakers, and that's who have been really shining so far in camp so far. So I don't know. Again, I probably just psyched myself up too much with the wide receivers, but I just haven't been overwhelmed.
Yeah, the receivers have been kind of on and off. They've had their days. I know Kane, I want to say Wednesday or Thursday, he had 3 drops. Mm-hmm. I know Paris Campbell's been out an extended time. I know he muffed some punts. I want to say it was in the last Saturday's practice. And then Funches has been in and out of the lineup with nagging cramps and just kind of rest days. Ty's really been the only consistent threat. I think a receiver group though, a lot of guys they've made like flash plays, but none of the bottom guys out behind Campbell, Kane, Funches, and Hilton have really separated themselves and made a statement. They'll be like, "Hey, Ballard, I deserve to be on this roster."
Yeah, there hasn't really been anybody who is on the outside looking in who has really wowed us from what I can tell, as far as Hogan or Penny Hart, but Penny Hart's I think he's been hurt. But I mean, there's been no one who has just, usually there's someone from the outside looking in who is on this during training camp who is just like, okay, we probably need to give this guy a roster spot, but it hasn't been a receiver this year so far.
Well, that was Deion Kane last year when he was a rookie. He came in and made some splash plays, and he's done that, of course, at camp. But every receiver's had a good day, and they've also had a really bad day. So it's kind of hard to separate them. But how many wide receivers do you think the Colts will keep on the active roster and on practice squad, if you think they have any on practice squad?
So I think altogether they'll have 6. That's just kind of what I'm basing off of what they had last year. I think they'll have 5 on the active roster and 1 on the practice squad. I think it's going to be 5. The big reason is because you really have 53 roster spots, and I think they'll have maybe an extra defensive lineman, because we have some guys who can play inside and outside. I think they might carry 5 safeties on this team, and I think they're going to carry 4 tight ends. And so I think it shrinks the availability of there being a 6th receiver on your roster. So I'm going to go with 5 on the active and then 1 on the practice squad.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. 5 on the active, but I think it's going to be very tough. Just it's going to be so interesting to see how these numbers are cut up this year. We could keep 3 tight ends, we could keep 4 tight ends, we can keep 9 or 10 offensive and defensive linemen, we could keep 5 safeties, like you've said, we could keep 6 corners. It's going to be very interesting to see how they, organize the team and how many positions or how many people they keep at each position. So if you were Chris Ballard, and you're not, of course, but if you're Chris Ballard, who would you keep as your 5 guys on the active roster and 1 on your practice squad after camp?
So, I mean, based off what I've seen and what I've read, I'm looking at obviously T.Y. Hilton, Devin Funchess, the rookie Paris Campbell, Deion Kane. I think he has shown enough to show that when he steps onto that field, he can be special at times. And then I think I'm going to go with Chester Rogers just because based off of his familiarity with the playbook and his familiarity with Andrew Luck. He can also has some special teams value. And then I'm looking at Doris Fountain on the practice squad.
Okay. Yeah, I can kind of agree with you on that. We're gonna go with the obvious of Hilton, Funches, and Campbell. I think Deion Kane's been doing some kickoff return work, so that's gonna be interesting to see if he gets to do that in preseason. But I think it's gonna be Kane's the 4th receiver, and I agree with you that Chester Rogers, he's been the most sure-handed punt returner we've had on this team the last couple of years. And even in camp so far, I've watched he's caught almost every punt, but you can just watch him run and cover the ball. He just kind of shaky, ooh, I don't know if he's going to catch that one. And then Paris Campbell wasn't a punt returner in Ohio State, so you're kind of molding him into that position if he ends up being that. So I think Chester Rogers being the most sure-handed punt returner will get him the 5th receiver spot. And then on practice squad, I think I'll agree with you. Doris Fountain had a hell of a play I can't remember I think it was last Thursday, where it was a 2-minute drill, and Philip Walker threw a great fade route, and Doris Fountain made the play on Jalen Collins, and it ended the practice with a touchdown. So I think Doris Fountain, another year on the practice squad, him getting his body right and, learning more how to do the route tree, and he could be fighting for a roster spot next year. But that's going to be probably my 5 guys on the active roster and 6 on the practice squad.
Mm-hmm.
So we will move on to the rookies that Chris Ballard selected in this year's draft. What's your thoughts, Eric, on the rookies so far?
So right now it seems like there are 3 rookies who have been sticking out. One is Rock Ya-Sin, our first pick in the early 2nd round. EJ Speed has really impressed me as far as everything that I've been seeing and reading. And then the tight end out of Alabama, no, it's not Irv Smith, it's Hale Hincus. Seems like he's been talked up a lot. I love that they're experimenting with a player like Ben Banigou, who's a guy who can do so many things well, especially with Jabal Sheard out for who knows how long. It'll be nice because Eberflus is a guy who loves to move guys around, and essentially he wants the offense to wonder, okay, and obviously Eberflus likes to run stunt plays here and there, but essentially just showing to the offense, the guy who's across from you have no idea what he's going to do, and whatever he does do, he's probably going to do it well. But it seems like, I don't know, it seems like every day Rock Ya-Sin is going out there and making a play at training camp. EJ Speed is getting a lot of, I think it's mostly because we weren't quite sure what to expect of him. When his name was called, I'm honestly wondering, and maybe, and again, I guess, Ballard and Dodds know more than I do, but I'm wondering if anybody else on any other teams drafting had any idea who this kid was, and if he was, I'm wondering if we could have just picked him up off of as an undrafted free agent. But then Hale Hincus. So what's really interesting is that Ebron and Mo Ali Cox are both your similar. They're 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" in that range as far as very athletic red zone threats, and then you have Hincus and Doyle are pretty similar as well as far as they're big-bodied, and they are as valuable as a receiver as they are a blocker. I'm just curious. I mean, really, Hincus in that sense, Hincus what does he offer something more valuable than Ross Travis? So those are. It seems like Ya-Sin, Speed, and Hincus. Those are my 3 guys that have been really sticking out to me. And then I would honestly love to hear what you've seen from Banagoo.
I haven't. Banagoo's been running a lot with the second team, which kind of surprised me because I thought when Jabal Shear went down that it would be Ben Banagoo getting almost half the amount of first team snaps, but it's almost all been Al-Qadim Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, with Matt Eberflus mixing and matching, it's so hard to actually define who's on the first team defense in camp early on because he's even said he wants to mix and match a lot. So like I've seen a lineup of Rock Ya-Sin and Quincy Wilson lineup at corner.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Kari Willis as the deep safety right next to Malik Hooker, and Kari Willis he's been playing really, really good in camp. That's going to be a guy that no one talks about that probably ends up playing a lot for the Colts this year, not only in special teams, but in dime packages, because there's been a lot of situations where I've seen where like I said, Malik Hooker and Kari Willis were in the back end. Yeah, Clayton Geathers is the sub linebacker with Darius Leonard. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. We'll have to see once it gets later in the preseason. But Rock Ya-Sin, he just looks like he's been in the league for 4, 5, 6 years. He's been just out there rock solid, no pun intended. But he's just been looking great out there guarding up against T.Y. Hilton and Devin Funches. Like he's not out there guarding Marcus Johnson or Steve Ishmael. He's going and guarding the best guy out there. And then you mentioned Hale Hinches. I thought he was probably going to be the one guy other than Shaq Taylor that could be the undrafted free agent that makes this roster this year. But I thought it was going to be a very far stretch because I thought we probably would only keep 3 tight ends. But he's been making plays a lot recently in the past week, and he's a very, very good blocking tight end. He could end up being our Ryan Hewitt type of guy where, he's in there as the H-back, fullback type of guy that's going to be primary goal is to just, block. But we've been seeing plays in the past game, so you never know. Maybe he makes the roster. I'd like to see it because he's been playing fairly good. And, of course, E.J. Speed, I want to say was his 3rd day as the starting Sam linebacker. I want to know if that's more still mixing and matching for Matt Eberflus or if he really thinks E.J. Speed could be a Sam linebacker for us, even though the Sam only plays about 20 plays or so. I know that's about the number he said, about 20 plays a game. So, but just having E.J. Speed out there, he's been making a lot of run stops with the 11-on-11 first team defense. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And then one more rookie I want to mention is 3rd-round pick Bobby Okereke. The last couple of days I was there, was playing with the first team, and he was playing well with the first team. I know he made a really, really big hit on Naheem Hines in the 7-on-7 drill, which got a lot of people's attention. So I think I want to see Bobby Okereke get some time at the first team defense. We might see it. We might see it week 1. We might see it week 2. But there might be a real competition there at Mike linebacker now. So how many rookies do you think might start week 1? Well, if we'll say if Paris Campbell's number 3, you can count him as a starter because we like to run a lot of 11 personnel. But how many rookies do you think will start week 1?
So honestly, I think the amount of rookies that will start each week will vary because we are so scheme deep. So like for instance, we're not going to try out the same. Like, a team is not going to try out the same game plan each week. You mold it to the team that you're playing. And so in that sense, for week 1, we're going to Los Angeles to play the Chargers. And so I'm saying 2, and later in this podcast, I might change my mind depending on how the conversation goes. But my 2 are obviously Campbell, and then I think Ben Banagoo will be the other starter.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be Paris Campbell. Rock Ya-Sin might end up being that opposite corner of Pierre Desir. I think it's really just going to be who plays better in preseason. I think both guys will get rep at the first team defense.
Well, how has Quincy Wilson looked?
Quincy's been solid. They've been running him a lot. When they go into sub, they've been running him a lot against tight ends and running backs. I think that's what Matt Eberflus likes the most with when he wants to use Quincy Wilson. He wants to use him up against bigger targets like tight ends because he's fast enough to keep up with them. But he's been in the first 11-on-11 reps, they've been using him as the corner opposite of Pierre Desir, and then the second time they run 11-on-11s, it's been Rock Ya-Sin out there opposite Desir. So Quincy's been looking pretty solid when they do a one-on-one drills with the receivers. He's made his pass breakups. I just think it's really going to be in the preseason. That's who Rock or Wilson will win out their job. But I think really outside of Rock and Paris Campbell, I don't really see any rookies starting for us. Maybe Kari Willis if we talk about sub packages, but that's getting really, really technical.
Right.
Okay, so we will go on to the first team defense we've been talking about a lot. Do you think this defense could be a top 10 scoring defense again this year, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, considering how the Colts defense is built, I mean, they're essentially they're built to the whole bend but don't break defense, and the fact that they have pretty much brought back everyone from last year's team is very valuable, especially considering they were able to hold on to Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator, so they are able to further familiarize themselves with the depths of that playbook, the audibles, and the changes that they can make at any time. Obviously, that'll fall on Darius Leonard and Anthony Walker to make those kind of changes in game. But along with this team also added depth to the cornerback room. They added speed to the linebacking core. Again, no pun intended. And they also added Justin freaking Houston. So, and I've talked about this before on the RosterGuy podcast. This defense is going to be fresh late in games and late in the season. When certain teams, when certain quarterbacks, when their arms might be getting a little tired come December or January. I think our guys on defense are going to be again. This is probably the deepest team that we've had in Indianapolis.
Yeah,
from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you on the depth. It's not gonna make Jabal Sheard or Al-Qadim Muhammad or our main guys. They're not gonna be forced to play 80 or 90% of the snaps. You look at Justin Houston. You talked about him. He might only have to play 60, maybe 70% of the snaps on defense, and it's going to be almost one job: either set the edge on the run game, or go get the quarterback, and that's going to be something big.
And that's his game. I mean,
yeah.
So it works out perfectly.
And this will be his first year in a 4-3, but as a 3-4 linebacker, he was almost a pass rusher. So it's going to be better for him this year because he'll only have to focus on going to get the quarterback. But I think it's going to be tough for this team to be a top 10 scoring offense this year, just because you're going to be playing the Chargers. You're going to be playing the Atlanta Falcons, who are going to be so much better this year. The Raiders are going to probably put up points with their offense. You look at the Chiefs, of course, the Saints. The Panthers are going to be fairly good. The Steelers in Pittsburgh, we seem to give up 40 points at least when we're in Pittsburgh. So I think even if they don't get top 10, this team could still very much get a first-round bye in the playoffs if they're above 15. I know the year we went to the AFC Championship game, Andrew Luck had, I want to say, a top 15 scoring defense, and that's really all you need when you have a top 5 scoring offense like we will have this year.
Right.
So back to a little bit of a camp question. Do you think there is a real competition at Mike linebacker between Bobby Okereke and Anthony Walker? Or do you think it's a little bit of mix and matching?
Yeah, it's a mix and matching thing, because I think there are some plays, certain situations where you want Anthony Walker out there because of his leadership and based off of his value that he brings to stopping the run. In the same sense, Okereke brings a skill set that Anthony Walker at this time doesn't have. So again, it's just one of those things where Okereke is going to get his snaps. It's just going to happen, but that does not mean that he is the new Mike linebacker. I think Walker is at this point is still the starter. But there will be certain situations where Okereke is going to be asked to do something, and I think he's going to do it well. Again, I think Okereke is going to get plenty of snaps. There's a reason that we drafted him in the 3rd round. And if you look at the early part of the season, who will be playing? This is the tight ends we're going to be playing in the first half of the season: Hunter Henry, Delaney Walker, Travis Kelce, who right now might be the best tight end in the league.
I'll stop you there. He is the best tight end.
Yeah. And then Noah Fant. So we need guys like Okereke who can cover a lot of ground and who can run with guys. I'm not saying that Walker can't, but that's not his strong suit. So we need Okereke with his speed and his athleticism to help limit the production for those guys.
So do you think Okereke is going to be the primary Mike linebacker in the sub packages?
I think so. It'll just depend on what Eberflus sees out there. If he's thinking that, if it's 3rd and 4, and he thinks that, and if we're going up against,
Let's say Chargers week 1.
Chargers week 1, right? Chargers week 1. I mean, in that situation, you're probably, he's depending on what he's seeing, they're probably going to pass it, because who knows what they're going to have who knows who they're going to have at running back at that point with Melvin Gordon holding out. But that's one of those things where these guys study tape. And so I think Okereke is going to have I think he'll probably get at least 20% of the Mike linebacker snaps.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So we'll move on to our last question on the defensive side. Who do you think is the starting cornerback opposite Pierre Desir week 1 when we go to Los Angeles to play the Chargers?
Well, and I talked about this earlier. I told you I might have changed my mind to 3 starters back when we were talking about that. I honestly, it is very, very, very possible that Rock Yassin starts that game solely because we play a lot of zone, but we also have some really good corners who can play man. You have to imagine that Pierre Desir will be matched up against Keenan Allen. That's just, I mean, I don't know how you can argue against that. And so, do you know who's opposite of Keenan Allen? It's Mike Williams, who's taller than I am, and I'm a pretty tall guy. He's 6'4". And so my first thought was, that could be Quincy Wilson, because Quincy Wilson is about 6'2". But Rock Yassin is a very physical player. That's a guy who, despite giving up probably 3 inches to Mike Williams, can still knock him off his route initially and jam him at the line of scrimmage. And obviously Kenny Moore is going to be the slot corner. He's going to be making plays all over the field. So I think I think we talked about this earlier. It's either Quincy Wilson or it is Rock Yassin. It would not surprise me if, I guess for me, I'll say Rock Yassin. Again, I told you I might change my mind from earlier. But that's strictly, and the week after that, I mean, each week, they might take Quincy out there because maybe they think Quincy can do a better job against their wide receiver too. You just don't know.
I think Rock Yassin I think he's probably by far our best straight up man-to-man cornerback that we're going to have on our roster this year. No slack to Pierre Desir, but just Rocky was at Temple and he was just on guys all the time, and it was hard to complete passes on him. He's going to have to work on not being as handsy. I've seen him a couple times in camp get some pass interference, some holding calls. So you have to work on that, of course. But I think I'll go opposite. I think Quincy Wilson will end up being the week 1 starter just because his familiarity with the whole defense. Well, right. I think Rock early on might only get situational work where it's gonna be like, hey, we need to go guard the tight end or whatever, like Hunter Henry, like you mentioned, or Delaney Walker. But we don't know. Of course, it's August. Again, we still got a whole month away from week 1 of the regular season, so a lot of things could change. So we will see about that. So Eric, tell the good people where you could find you.
Like, you want me to give these people my home address or what?
Yeah, they might send you some gifts or anything like that.
No, so the best way they can get a hold of me is through Twitter, I guess. My Twitter handle is @ColtsCommentary. And then I'll RosterGuy is another good place to find me, although I'm not in charge of our Twitter account. But I also run our Facebook page. RosterGuy is a Facebook page. So, those are your best ways to get a hold of me.
All right, awesome. So, Eric, any final thoughts?
I am super excited. I've not been this excited for Colts football in quite some time. Mostly, and what's really funny is I think what will take up a lot of my excitement over the next few weeks is when the Colts officially submit their final roster for the year, because there's going to be a ton of storylines, guys who face an uphill battle to make on the roster who end up being successful. Don't be surprised if there are some surprise cuts.
There always is.
There always is, and that's what you want though, is you want tough cut calls come late August. So I'm just super excited for this year. I think we have a really tough schedule, but I'd rather have. But that's another thing though, is that, I mean, would you want a cupcake schedule? I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to have a 14-2 record, but we're gonna have some really good games this year. I mean, the AFC South is probably, from top to bottom, is probably the best division, might be the best division in the NFL right now. But we're going to be playing Drew Brees. We're going to be playing the Pittsburgh. We're going to be playing the Chiefs and the Chargers. I mean, we have, as much as people can kind of groan at how difficult our schedule is. I mean, from a pure fan standpoint, this is going to be such a fun year for Colts football.
I can agree. Yeah, the roster cut is going to be very interesting to see like how the numbers play out and who makes the team, who doesn't make the team. No, I think this is going to be one of the more anticipated cut down days in Colts history in the last couple of years because this is such a deep roster.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you look at the team from 3 years ago, I mean, 3 years ago there wasn't really a lot of depth on this team, and there wasn't really a lot of talent on the top side of the team either. But it's a good problem to have, and I'm glad that we have it.
Yep. Well, Eric, I appreciate you very much for coming on. Again, if you guys want to follow Eric, he's got some very funny memes, of course, all the time. You can follow him at Colts Commentary on Twitter. Everybody, reach out to him on Twitter. Tell him thanks for coming on the podcast of literally the 4th episode. You didn't have to do that. Eric, I appreciate it very much.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, man. I really do.
Yep. Of course, if Circle City podcast listeners, make sure you check out the merch store and get some nice merch. We got a couple people ordering some stuff. Make sure if you order something, send it to me DMs, and I will shout you guys out, of course, on the page. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Thank you for listening.